Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into the incredibly stressful, high-stakes world of IVF. When you're going through fertility treatments, you are constantly searching for anything, any edge at all that might improve your chances of bringing home a healthy baby, right? And because of that intense, very human desire, so many patients desperately turn to adjunct therapies for a little bit of hope. One of the most popular and honestly most fiercely debated of these therapies is acupuncture. I mean, walk into literally any fertility clinic waiting room, and it's practically guaranteed someone sitting there is on their phone Googling it, wondering if they should be booking a session right that second. So today, we are going to unpack the evidence-based reality of acupuncture in IVF.
It all boils down to this one question. Does acupuncture actually help? We're going to look strictly at the clinical evidence to see if acupuncture is a guaranteed way to boost your IVF success, or if the reality is, well, much more complicated.
Let's kick things off with the most recent and frankly most promising data we have, a massive 2024 updated meta-analysis. Now, if you're not a researcher, a meta-analysis is essentially a giant study of studies. Instead of just doing one new experiment, researchers pool the data from dozens of existing trials to look for a much stronger overarching signal. And this wasn't just some small, isolated look at the data. They looked at 25 different trials encompassing over 4,700 participants. At first glance, wow, the numbers are incredibly striking. Looking at the clinical pregnancy rate for the pooled control groups, meaning the patients who didn't get any acupuncture during their cycles, they sat at 33.2%. But for those in the acupuncture groups, that number jumped to 43.6%. That is a massive 10-point jump in clinical pregnancies for patients who used acupuncture. If you're a patient staring down the daunting odds of IVF, seeing a 10% bump is an absolutely huge deal.
And it gets even better. When we look at the ultimate goal of IVF, actually bringing home a baby, the live birth rate, we see a very similar gap. The control group had a live birth rate of 28.7%, while the acupuncture group jumped all the way up to 38%. Again, nearly a 10-point difference. Let's be real, looking at just these 2024 numbers, it looks like a clear-cut victory. Numbers like that would make anyone undergoing IVF want to book a session immediately.
But right as your hopes are rising, we kind of have to pull back to reality for a second, because the broader historical data is incredibly messy. We can't just look at one recent meta-analysis in a vacuum. There is a very real tension between this recent data, suggesting a distinct benefit, and the older, highly respected reviews that tell a completely different story. To understand that messy history, we can look at the NHS Health Research Authority summary. They bluntly describe the research as inconclusive because of study design differences and patient selection variability. And they're definitely not alone. Earlier comprehensive reviews, including the major Cochrane reviews, which, by the way, are basically the gold standard in medical research, give patients absolute whiplash. They found no clear overall benefit around the time of embryo transfer. So how on earth can the data be so completely conflicted? Well, it comes down to what we call the protocol problem. The reason for this scientific whiplash is that there's absolutely no standard protocol. None. Some studies only did 2 sessions right on embryo transfer day. Others did 4 or more before the cycle even started. On top of that, they compared these groups to completely different things. Sometimes they used sham acupuncture to test for a placebo effect, and sometimes they used no extra treatment at all. Actually, scratch that. It's not even comparing apples to oranges. It's comparing apples to oranges to bananas. It's impossible to confidently recommend one standard protocol when the studies are all over the place.
So, if the data is this conflicted, why do researchers even suspect acupuncture could assist an IVF cycle? Why keep pouring money into studying it?
Well, there are 3 main biological theories here. First, it might improve blood flow to the ovaries and the uterine environment. Second, some think it positively affects your hormonal signaling. But the third and probably most notable theory is stress regulation. Acupuncture might really help reduce the intense, suffocating anxiety associated with IVF, supporting physical relaxation during what is undeniably an overwhelming time.
But here is the absolute anchor point you've got to remember. Biological plausibility does not equal clinical certainty. Biological plausibility means, sure, it makes logical sense in theory that improving blood flow could help, but clinical certainty requires proven, consistent results in trials. Just because a mechanism makes sense on paper doesn't mean we can guarantee it'll result in a baby, especially when the trials are so wildly inconsistent. We have to stay grounded in the fact that the absolute strongest drivers of IVF success are not adjunct therapies. They just aren't. The real drivers are core medical factors: your embryo quality, your age, ovarian response, sperm factors, and the clinic's laboratory performance.
As wonderful and relaxing as acupuncture might feel, it literally cannot fix a genetically abnormal embryo, and it can't overcome a bad lab environment.
So, what is the final verdict? Where does this leave you, your partner, or even your clinic staff when deciding whether to incorporate acupuncture into your next cycle?
It all comes down to managing expectations. Clinics should absolutely never sell this as a proven implantation booster. Saying this will improve implantation just isn't backed by consistent science. Instead, it needs to be discussed honestly as an uncertain, yet potentially really relaxing option.
Ultimately, since it is generally a very low-risk procedure, it's a perfectly reasonable optional adjunct if your primary goal is stress reduction and just feeling supported. It's a way to reclaim a little bit of control over your body during a process where you often feel like you have absolutely none. Which brings us to a final question for you to ponder. As you navigate the incredibly taxing, overwhelming process of IVF, ask yourself, what role does stress reduction play in your medical journey? How much value do you place on simple peace of mind? And is that enough of a victory on its own? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and I truly hope this look at the evidence empowers you to make the best choice for your own path forward.